Hello, everybody. This is Mariana from the eTwinning Inclusive Education Group, and I'm very happy for all of you to have joined 11th eTwinning online webinar by, by the eTwinning Inclusive Education Group. This is also scheduled as the online seminar, and we are very thankful that this was the opportunity to have so many participants available to come. Today's presenter is Sussane Borjesson. She is my dear colleague and also a member of the Inclusive Education Group. But before we start, and before I officially introduce Sussane, I would like you, if you can, if you have your mobile phones with you, if you have noticed, well done, people from Turkey are already aware of the Mentimeter. Thank you so much. But so maybe you could go to the menti.com using your mobile phone or maybe your computer in another sidebar and just post which country are you from. You have to add, of course, just a moment, you have to add the code 549711. Okay, so I have prepared just a few questions, so Sussane and I would like to officially know and see how many people, which countries do they come from. So mainly, so far just 5 people have voted. I don't know how many of you are familiar with them. Yeah, people are posting in chat. Very good. From Turkey, Albania, Croatia. Monia Mahmoud, that's a name? Okay. Macedonia, Italy, Turkey. Okay, so Mentimeter is a very nice tool if you would like to motivate your students in the beginning or in some of the online seminars, webinars, and so on. All in all, you get a wonderful word cloud. Where do people come from? So the students enter the www.menti.com and they just add a code, right? And you can have different types of asking people questions. This is a word cloud. And then when I switch to another one, this is another question where you need to vote. Where do you work? So some of you will probably type in chat, and some of you will probably vote in the Mentimeter. So for instance, so far people are working in primary and secondary education. Okay, good. Primary school, okay. Yes, Christina, super application. I'm glad if you have heard for the first time. It's very easy to use, so you can check it out later. Very nice. Okay, thank you so much for your vote. So it's like half, Sussane. People are mainly from the secondary or primary education.
Yeah.
Okay, and let's see for the last question. The last question is, how long have you been teaching? You can either vote using your Mentimeter or you can post in chat and we can comment. Okay, so very good. 6 to 10, high school. Very good. Thank you so much for your answers. Okay. I'm glad that we have beginners, people who have just been teaching for a few years, and also some who are great experts in teaching. That's the spirit of eTwinning, constant lifelong learning. Okay, so I'm just going to stop sharing now. Thank you all for your wonderful answers. And again, I will start the presentation by Sussane. Sussane is from Sweden, and she has been teaching for the last 30 years.
Oh no.
No. Yeah, she hadn't written that to me. All in all, she is a teacher of Swedish and English as a second language at the National Upper Secondary School for Physically Disabled Students, and where students are enrolled in general upper secondary school curriculum, but in need of special education needs. Her students are usually with congenital and acquired diagnoses such as cerebral palsy and spinal bifida, muscular diseases, and other rare diseases. It is a challenging job, but she says that it's very rewarding. And I'm very thankful that she has decided to be here with us. I'm going to give her the mic because she will tell a few more things about herself so that I don't take a lot of her time. Thank you all so much for coming, and thank you, Sussane, for doing this wonderful presentation. I will just have a quick hello. for the two of us to have a screenshot, and we can start with your presentation. I'm now muting myself.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm very pleased that so many of you joined this presentation. I'm going to try to say a few words about myself and share with you some ideas and examples from my work and what I'm doing with my students in my Swedish classes. What I will focus on today is literary analysis with less writing. And this is something I try to work out for my SEN, because I teach only SEN students. And things usually take a lot of time for them, especially writing. So this has been something that I really try to work on. Okay. Something about what this presentation will contain. First, I will say a few words about my school and something about what I do, and I'll try to explain the purpose of this presentation, and I will also share with you the core content and knowledge requirements that I work with in my Swedish classes. I will also try to explain some of my time-saving strategies that I use when I work. And I will also give you some hands-on examples from tests that I have put together. And finally, I will share with you how we worked with a novel in the class, reading and analyzing it. And at last, I will say a few words about what I think is important when you work with SEN students. So I hope this will be, well, I will try to provide some ideas and examples that might inspire some of you. Okay, let's go on to the first slide. So a few words about my school. It is called the National Upper Secondary School for Physically Disabled Students in Stockholm. Currently we have 23 students and we are 9 teachers. What I haven't written here, I'm sorry about that. We have a number of student assistants, and some of our students also have their own assistants. But for those who haven't their own assistants, our school provides school assistants during daytime when they are in school. What is also, I think, maybe a bit special with our school is that the students, they're all enrolled in the general upper secondary school curriculum, but they all need special education. I'm going to come back to this a little later in the presentation. At our school, we also have a dormitory close to the school, where currently we have 5 students living there. And we also have our own habilitation team. We have occupational therapists, physios, we have welfare officers, a psychologist and a speech pathologist. So this is quite unique, I think. And we also have a health center or a gym for our students, which we're sort of proud of. And here is a picture of our gym. You can see that we have some gym equipment, and this is a room where the students usually go when they have a break or something. So they really like this room, and it's open all day, so they can just go in there if they want to. All right. And a few words about me. Mariana said that I've been teaching for 30 years. No, I haven't. I have worked or taught in school since 2010. So I've worked for about 8 years teaching. So I am aware that there are many of you who have been teaching for a very long time. Yeah. Okay. So what I do is I teach Swedish and English as second language at my school. Sometimes I have some other courses as well, but usually I fill my days with Swedish and English. At least this year I do. Okay, and I meet students with both congenital and acquired diagnoses. The most common diagnoses at my school are cerebral palsy, spina bifida, all kinds of muscular diseases. Those are the most common ones. But we also have a number of students with all kinds of rare diseases that you can come up with. I've met a number of different ones there as well. Even if I have only worked at my school for about 4 years, well, it's very interesting anyway. And okay, acquired diagnosis as well. I should mention that. It's more usual that we have students with congenital diagnosis, but acquired diagnosis such as well, people who have had accidents or some kind of virus or cancer or something like that. We also have those kind of students every now and then. Well, I also just recently, actually 2 days ago, finished my Swedish master studies. So I'm very happy about that. So now I have a long, I will try to come through the bureaucracy and finally get the, well, I don't know, some sort of, yeah, whatever you get when you have done your final exam. I don't know. It will be some sort of proof of that I'm actually a master of Swedish. I don't know. Okay. And I'm also going to try to explain to you some things I do to improve the situation for my SEN students. I've tried a lot of things. It's a lot of trial and error. I should mention that you try things out and it doesn't really work at all. So I'm going to present to you some things that actually worked for me, but we'll see. Hopefully you will get inspired and try something out, and we'll see how it goes for you. Anyway, test construction is something that I think is interesting because actually tests are something that works quite well with SEN students, at least with most of my students, I believe. Writing tasks, I think writing tasks, that is sort of a struggle, because if you do too much steering, some of the students will well, I think feel that they have no options of their own and things like that. So and if you have less steering, then they don't know what to do and they maybe need some more guidance. So this is a bit tricky, I think, with writing tasks. So I've tried out some different things with that, but this will not be taken up in this presentation. Also, how to analyze students' results and try to give feedback to them that they understand. This is also something that I think can be sometimes difficult, because I know what I see, but it's a bit difficult to tell my students what I see in a way that they understand. So that is one thing as well that I'm struggling with and try to improve. And it will not be discussed in this. It will not be discussed further in this presentation either. So, another thing I've tried to work with is giving the students simple and effective tools to analyze both their own and other students' texts, like a peer response and things like that. This can be very much. Or very interesting, should I say, because I have students from time to time who, the socializing between students or social codes and things like that, that can sometimes be difficult for SEN students, and they might write or say things to each other that are maybe not appropriate always. So it's a lot about etiquette and things like that too. So that is interesting. But I have tried it, and with different results. But I'm going to try again because I think it's interesting and important. And finally, how to make teaching and learning more effective in general. So I really try to find out what kind of time-saving activities you can try to use to save time to to have time to cover all the content of the syllabus, because we have a lot of content in our courses and we only have 100 hours to do it. And I will come to this, actually I will come to this now, I think, yes. So I'm going to say a few words about this, what I call the time dilemma. Writing is sort of an issue for my students. Writing by hand definitely is. Digital writing is also very time consuming for my students. And as I mentioned before, we follow the general upper secondary school curriculum. And this curriculum is, of course, designed for the average student's capacity. This is where where this dilemma is sort of placed. So this means that time is scarce. It's really scarce when you work with special needs students, especially with mine who always have multiple diagnoses, because they're all of them are share bound, but they also have other diagnoses as well. So they usually have a lot to struggle with. Okay, so now we will come to core content of the course Swedish 3, and this is our most advanced Swedish course. And I'm going to just present to you the core content that covers literature. And it says, literary text authored by both women and men in the genres of prose, poetry and drama, a literary analysis of stylistic devices and narrative techniques, key concepts and tools of literary history. So this is taken from the Swedish National Agency for Education's website a few days ago. So this is what we're supposed to cover when we study literature, which I think is, well, quite difficult, and it is a lot to cover. And I will also present to you, and oh yes, I was going to say this too, that I'm aware that this might not be, well, suitable for primary school or whatever, but I think that you've worked many years with this, and you know how to adapt something to your own teaching. So you can still take ideas from this and make them or adapt them to your teaching. So I hope you will make use of this, even if you teach at primary school or something like that. You can still take some ideas. Okay, so here are the knowledge requirements regarding literature for this course, Swedish 3. Okay, so for E, or for pass, and if you can see, maybe if I just try to point at this here with my little arrow here, I think that there is some sort of mistake here, but maybe we can try to read it anyway. So for E, or pass, the students, it says here, the students can make an in-depth and detailed literary text analysis of a theme, a genre, or an author's work. In their analysis, students use with certainty, and this should be with some certainty, I think, because it says so in the knowledge requirements for C, so I don't know. I think there is a mistake here. With certainty, literary concepts and tools, and support their interpretation through examples from the texts. And for C, students can make an in-depth and detailed literary text analysis of a theme, a genre, or an author's work. In their analysis, students use with some certainty literary concepts and tools, and support their interpretation through well-chosen examples from the texts. And finally, for A, the students can make an in-depth and detailed, accurate and balanced literary text analysis of a theme, a genre, or an author's work from a number of different perspectives. In their analysis, students use with certainty literary concepts and tools, and support their interpretation through well-chosen examples from the text. So what I did when I put together the literature test, or whatever I did a test with two parts, one with poetry and one about a poem and one about a text extract. So what I did was I focused on let's go back to the core content. I focused on literary tools and narrative techniques, which I interpreted as close reading and narratology. So I based the test on narratology, and we worked a lot with close reading before the students did the test. So we did this together a lot in the classroom before the test, actually, and read about it in the book, of course. Okay, let's go on to the next slide here. Okay, E, C, and A. Okay, let's go back to that. I see that there is a question here. E is the grade for pass. C is something in between, and A is pass with distinction. Or is that the highest grade you can get? Yeah, okay. So E is the lowest grade for pass, and then the others are more and more advanced. Okay, so I'm going to present a few time-saving strategies that I use. Some of them, it says it time-saving strategies for teacher and students. Sometimes they're not time-saving for the teacher, but they are for the students. So, but anyway, that's what I wrote in that very moment. So the first thing that I think is really important is save time for yourself by using a course book, preferably digital if possible, if your students have computers. We are very lucky. Our students have both computers and iPads. Not all of them, but some of them have both a computer and an iPad provided from school. So, which I think is it helps a lot. So as a base for the studies, I think a course book is very good. So because the students can find all the information they need there, and it will save you a lot of time because you don't have to make up your own assignments and information material, whatever you want to give your students. So I think this is essential. And what I did was, when we did this literary studies, I replaced written analysis with reading and understanding tests. I call them reading and understanding tests because there's a lot of analysis in them too, not just reading and understanding, but yeah, anyway. And I did this both with analysis of poem and analysis of text. You can do this with poems and text extracts or short stories, I think. And what we also did was we read a novel and I only used oral activities. They did no writing when we read the book. But it took some time it was sort of time consuming for me because I had to make matrices and things like that too, and take a lot of notes about the students, what the students did. Okay, so that was something about time-saving strategies. Right, so okay, here's a photo. We have a number of students who are into this electric wheelchair hockey, and we're very proud of these students. They are among the best in the country at this, and yeah, it's really something that they like a lot. I don't know if you've seen this, but maybe you can watch something on YouTube afterwards or something if you like. This is really interesting. You can't really see this here, but oh my god, I need to check something. Okay, what is that called? Just a second. I'm just checking out something. Okay, so they have some sort of hockey stick in front on this wheelchair. It's very difficult to see it here, but maybe if you Google it, you can see what it looks like when it's not in action, so to speak. But this is something our students, they're really into this, at least some of them. And we have one guy who's very good at this, who's integrated at another upper secondary school, and he's really the Zlatan of electric wheelchair hockey. We're very proud to have him with us. All right, let's go on to something. Go back to the poetry and literature again. So this is a question or a sample question that I had in my test. Actually, I called here. I say example question. If you're very much into tests and know a lot about test construction, then you know that they should actually be called items. So test item instead of test questions. But I call them test questions because it's a bit easier and everyone knows what a question is. I've also given a link to Mariana about this because I thought about something from the course I read about test construction, where we got to read this something that called materials for the guidance of test item writers, and that link is it comes from the Association of Language Testers in Europe, ALTE, that you might be acquainted with. I didn't know about them before I attended this course, but this is a very good guide to help you through coming up with test items or test questions. So I really recommend reading that one. It's very good. But of course you don't have to read all of it. You can read the parts that are interesting for you. But I really recommend it. Okay. So here is one question that I had in the poetry test, and it says, how can the narrator of the poem be described? A, the poem has a third-person narrator, and B, the poem has a first-person narrator who is taking part, or C, the poem has a first-person narrator who is observing. So here the student has to first of all come up with if the poem has a first or a third-person narrator, and then if it is a first person, is it someone who's taking part in what is happening in the story or in the poem, or is this person just observing what is happening here? So this is one of the questions. Of course, you need to, of course it depends on the content of the poem. So, but this was good for the poem I have chosen. Unfortunately, it's in Swedish, and I'm not it's not for me to translate poems. I'm not that skilled. It's very difficult. Unfortunately, I can't give you the poem itself, but I hope you still can make use of the questions and how I have composed them. All right. The next question from the poetry test is, which description is the most suitable? Your answer should be based on your interpretation of the poem. So it says, the narrator of the poem is A, a child, B, a teenager, C, an adult, or D, an oldie. So here the students, they have to really read the poem, I think, a number of times and try to come up with who the age of the narrator of the poem. And I think that this question might add something to the understanding of the poem. Another example question from the poem is about whether it's a free verse poem or a metrical verse poem. And as you can see, I have provided to the students here the concepts or the words like free verse and metrical, because this is very difficult usually for SEN students to remember concepts and words and things like that. If they're difficult words, it's very difficult for them to remember. So I sort of try to turn things around and provide this to the students, and they will have to concentrate instead of on the poem itself and what's in it and how it's formed. So I think this is a good strategy for giving questions to the students. So I try to think like this when I make my tests, because I think it's more important that they can identify things than that they remember exactly what the name was, because it is within their diagnosis. It's often within their diagnosis, and it's not something that they can really do something about. Or try to be better at remembering, for example. It's not easy for someone who has difficulties remembering things. So I think this can be very helpful for these students, because they can still show you that they have an understanding of things. All right, and the photo here, actually you can see me somewhere there in black. And here we are attending, let's see, well, yes, we are at the Swedish Agency for Accessible Media. So we visited them because we have a lot to do with them, or we don't really have anything to do with them, but our students use both the newspaper they make, which is called 8 sidor, or in English this would be 8 pages, and that is 8 pages of news. And this is a weekly magazine or news magazine in easy Swedish. And we use it at our school, and I also know that many schools with second language learners of Swedish use this newspaper or weekly magazine, which is, I think, very good. I'm going to come back to the Swedish Agency for Accessible Media soon. Okay, another example question from the poetry test. And it goes, what characterizes the language in the poem? So here I've taken 3 different answers, and these are things that the students have read in their course book. So I try to use the words from the course book in order to make my students feel more familiar with it, which was some kind of strategy from my side. I don't know if it worked out, but it's always good to use things that they're familiar with and not present new things in a test, because that's not really a good idea, especially not with SEN students. The answers here, or let me just say the question again. What characterizes the language in the poem? A, the language is modern with a contemporary character. B, the language is characterized by old-fashioned formulations, or C, the language is innovative and contains made-up words. So here they have to analyze the language of the poem, and this worked out pretty well, I think. All in all, this poetry test was, I would say, a success, because most of my students actually made it the first time we did it. So I was very happy with that. And it contained the work with this test. It was, I would say, blood, sweat and tears, because I almost gave up in doing this, but I was very happy afterwards with the result and everything, because I don't know if I guess I will put together a test like this again sometime, but it was a lot of work. But for my students, it was a success, and that's the most important thing. Okay, so this test was a combined test. I did both a poetry test and a text extract test. I think you can also do this with a short story, but I used a text extract from a book. And I'm going to say just a few things about this story, because it's easier for you to understand than these questions. So this text extract was quite short, but it said a lot anyway, and it is about 3 girls. First we have Lotta and Åsa, and they're always playing together in the backyard playground at where they live, and they're best friends. But one day another girl comes to the backyard playground, and she starts to befriend Lotta, and then she starts bullying Åsa, and Lotta joins her in bullying Åsa, who used to be her best friend. So this is a very it's a very cruel story, and goes right into the heart of the one who of the one who's reading it, of the reader. So I thought that this could really work to use with my students. And some of the questions I used in that test, I will present a few of them. Again, we come back to the narrator. So I've chosen here to let's see, which narrative situation is the most suitable? A third-person narrator who tells the story in the moment or in present time. B, a third-person narrator who is retelling the story. And C, a first-person narrator who tells the story in the moment. Or D, a first-person narrator who is retelling the story. So here we have some, you know, the narrator as usually, if you read literature at the university, you would call them heterodiegetic or homodiegetic and things like that. But I never present those kind of words to my students, because it's really no use. I think the most important thing is that they can identify what it is that is going on in the story and who's telling it, and etc. So I think this makes more sense. There's no use presenting difficult concepts in that way to my students. They will have to meet it at university instead, if they go on to university, which some of them actually do, but not very many. Okay, let's go on to the next questions. Here I have tried to think about how people are affected in the story. So how does it affect Lotta that Anna comes to the backyard playground? So Lotta is the girl who befriends the new girl, and then they both together start bullying Lotta's old friend. So how does it affect Lotta that Anna comes to the backyard playground? Your answer should be based on your interpretation of the text. So here is where the students can take examples from the text and provide them to their answer, which I think is good, because then they show that they have understood what the story is about. How does it affect Åsa that Anna comes to the backyard playground? And as you all understand, Åsa is very much affected by this because it really changes her life. If you continue reading the book, you will know that. Anyway, this is a very as a reader, you're also very affected by this story. So I think it's good to choose something that actually goes into the heart of the students, because then it's easier for them to identify or come up with answers. Okay, and I will also tell you, this is not from a children's story. This is from a novel, a Swedish novel that it's not written for teenagers or young people or something like that. It is a story for adults. So I haven't chosen a text that is extra simple or something for them. It's from a contemporary Swedish novel. Okay, next question. Okay, here we come into the weather situation. And by the way, it's been snowing here today in Stockholm, but it's no longer snowing outside. I don't know what kind of weather you have where you are right now, but here it's very cold. And as I said, snowing earlier today. It's terrible weather. I wish I was in a warm place where the sun is shining or something. Okay, let's go back to the question. Sorry about that. I'm always slipping and sliding a bit. Okay, the weather could be seen as a picture of the situation in a story. What weather conditions are described in the story, and in what way can they be interpreted as a picture of what takes place in the backyard playground? So the weather here in the story is very gloomy and grey, and it's very muddy on the ground, which also plays a role in what is going on between the girls. So this is really a question that it makes sense in the situation. And as we the year before discussed this Sturm und Drang thing from the romantic period, or it made sense, and it was something that they could relate to. Okay, that was all about the test that I made. So now I will go on describing how we worked with the novel Willful Disregard by Lena Andersson. And I'm going to read a few lines about that book, so you can have some idea about what it is about. And this book is translated to English as well, so if you would like to read it and use it, you can always do that. I absolutely recommend it, because actually this is the only book I've read with students so far that they discussed well, the whole school was discussing this book because the students, they were so interested in what was going to happen between the two lovers, and they talked to other teachers and to their fellow students about this book. So it was discussed a lot during the period while we were reading it. Okay, so I'm going to read just a few lines about it. Esther Nilsson is a sensible person in a sensible relationship. She knows what she thinks and she acts according to her principles. Until the day she's asked to give a lecture on a renowned artist, Hugo Rask. This man himself sits in the audience, spellbound, and when the two meet afterwards, he has the same effect on her. From then on, Esther's existence is intrinsically linked to that day, and the event that follow change her life forever. It's bitingly funny and darkly fascinating. Willful Disregard is a story about total and desperate devotion, and about how willingly we betray ourselves in the pursuit of love. So to be honest, these two mid-aged people, they act, well, somewhat like teenagers, waiting around the corner of the block to see if the person they love comes out of his or her apartment, etc. And things like that. I think the students sort of relate more to teenage love than to grown-ups. So this is a very interesting book, and I absolutely recommend it. Maybe not reading with students, but it's very interesting. And Lena Andersson is one of our best authors, I think, contemporary authors. She's very good. Okay, let's go back to this. What do I say here? Yes, we read it in class, and again, I saved time. I used the material that was handed out on a teacher's night at the publishers, and then of course I added some of my own ideas. That's what teachers always do. I think you do that too. Well, I guess you do that too. Anyway, so almost all of the students listened to the book, and this is where we come back to the Swedish Agency for Accessible Media, because they produce talking books, and many of our students use those, and it could be for lots of reasons. For example, many of them have disabilities, and they can't really hold the book and turn the pages in a book, so therefore it makes sense for them to listen instead. They might have dyslexia and need to need to listen to the book because of that. We also have students with severe visual impairment, and we also from time to time have students who are non-literate who need to listen. So this is really useful, and we use talking books a lot at my school. So what we did from the start was to really try to get into the book. So I used already prepared questions, and we had a session where I read aloud, and then we discussed chapter by chapter the 3 first chapters. Yes, and I prepared specific questions about characters and difficult words and things like that, just to make sure that everyone was really into the book from the beginning. And I think this was a benefit for my students. All right, and here in this picture you can see one of my students who is very technically skilled. He used something called a PCI Mini, and which is an eye tracking kind of tool. So he is writing with his eyes, so to speak, and he also because he is what you say would he can't speak. He can make sounds, but he cannot speak. What he does is he writes with his eyes, and he also, if you can see here, I'm trying to point this out, he also adds sound to his slides. And he's doing all this by himself. He doesn't want anyone to help him. He thinks it's really important that he does things himself. You cannot really see the device on his computer, but it is like a, 10 or 12 centimeters long and 1 centimeter, do you say width? Anyway, it's a very small thing that is placed on his computer with a magnet. And it's this tool that helps him to write his answers. So basically he does this presentation all by himself, even though he cannot touch his computer and he cannot speak, which I think is really great. And I also want to add that he is actually the one who has the most advanced technical equipment. Many of our students do not have these things that he has. Okay. Let's go on to the next. Yes. So what we did after reading the first 3 chapters together was that the students read half of the book to somewhere halfway in the book themselves. And we didn't really have anything for them to do before that. They were just reading. And then when we were halfway through the book, I had a prepared discussion. And maybe you recognize these 4 roles. Maybe you have used them in your classroom. I don't know if these are, I've called them the questioner, the clarifier, the summarizer, and the crystal ball. I don't know what you call them, but anyway, what I did was that I gave my students 1 role each, and then they had to then they had a group discussion where they discussed and gave their ideas about their role. So the questioner's role is to form questions to discuss within the group, such as, and they could begin with why, in what way, how come, and these questions are supposed to start some kind of discussion within the group. And then we have the clarifier, and the clarifier's job is to highlight and clarify fuzzy details in the story and explain difficult concepts. Of course, in this book there are so many difficult concepts that it's not possible to explain all of them, but you can choose just a few, maybe help your students to choose as well if that's necessary. And then we have the summarizer, who sums up the story so far. And finally we have the crystal ball, whose job is to predict and discuss what might come up next in the story and how the story might end. And we stopped reading exactly where there was some kind of cliffhanger, and you didn't really know how this relationship would continue. So you have to find some good place to in the story to do this. Okay, I will leave this and go on to what we did more at this specific session was that I had some questions of my own that we discussed as well, to try to get deeper into the characters and the understanding of the story. So the first question here, I think I need some water. Oh my god. The first question here: how does Esther, who is the main character, feel? How do we know? And the second question: how does Hugo, the man Esther is in love with, feel? And how do we know? So here they have to come up with examples and really try to prove their opinion in these answers. Okay, and which character do we care about and why? These questions are quite good for discussion because they well, there will, I promise you, there will be some sort of discussion. At least it did in my group. And then it comes to this thing with text messages and emails. And etiquette about these. And this is also a very interesting discussion. Maybe it's not really analyzing the book, but I think that it's always good to pick up things from a story and discuss in a more general way, because that might also add something to the understanding of what the characters in the book are doing to each other, and how others might feel when you don't answer a text message or an email, when you ignore the other person, especially if you're in love with someone and you're being ignored. That's not. Well. I don't want to be in that situation. I really don't. So these questions, they were quite good, and I'm sure that these could also be adapted to any book. Of course, there are issues and questions you can pick up from a story that you can just have as discussion topics. So I think that these questions could also be adapted to almost any story. All right, here are some of my students. They are having some activities during a break, and they were very happy that I wanted to take a photo of them. Okay. And this is from the gym, by the way. Okay. Another thing that I actually picked up from a teacher's blog, where a teacher had used the Johari window. This is not a tool that is, it's not intended for literature. It's a psychology tool. But it can be used for analyzing characters in fiction. This specific story has a third-person narrator. I think a first-person narrator could be even more effective to use the Johari window, but it can still be used for this kind of analysis. I think this was very good, because what I did was I just did this simple chart on the whiteboard, and I wrote things down when the students said different things and where I was supposed to place them. And this was something that was very successful with my students. So let's take a look at this Johari window model. If you take a look at the top left corner, or maybe no, I will take a step back. Okay, I would first like to say that the Johari window, what the Johari window can help you explaining is, for example, what the character knows, what the specific character, because you sort of go into a specific character here. So what this specific character knows. This is one thing that you can get help explaining, and also what other characters know, and finally what the reader knows. So this is a quite interesting tool to use. So if we take a look at the top left corner here, this is called the open area or arena, and this tells us what everybody knows. So this tells us what everybody knows about this character. And then if we go on to the top right corner, this is called the blind spot. This is what everybody but the character knows. And in this story we have Esther, who doesn't really, for a long time, she doesn't really understand that she is in love with Hugo. She admires him, but she doesn't understand that she's in love. So this is kind of her blind spot. So this is how you can identify things that we understand, that everybody around this person understands, but the person, him or herself, does not understand. And then we have the hidden area or facade in the bottom left corner. And this tells us what the character knows, but what other doesn't know. And this is where I think the first person narrator, it is more effective to use this with a first person narrator, because if it is a first person narrator, we sort of get into that character and learn more about what secrets this person keeps. But still, I think those two upper windows are still very useful. When you think about it, this is I think this is very useful for analyzing characters. And finally, the unknown in the bottom here. Well, the bottom right corner. Sorry, I have such trouble with right and left. Okay, so this is about what no one knows. So I really think that, well, this created some really good discussions, and my students, they understood this tool, and they were able to use it. So I thought that this was good. All right, and the final discussion that we did with the Venn diagram, and I'm sure that very many of you already have met the Venn diagram in different kinds of situations. But what we did, how we used it, we did a comparison between the book we read, and they also read an extract from Goethe's Young Werther. So I think it was good, because then they met a classic story, and it was with sort of the same. There are many likenesses between Esther, who is desperately in love with Hugo, and Hugo doesn't love her very much. He's not very interested in her. And we also have young Werther, who loves Lotte, but Lotte she's already engaged, and she already has a boyfriend. So this comparison was also very effective, because they could see lots of different likenesses, but also some differences. So, and it also shows that it could just as well be a man who is desperately in love with someone who doesn't love him back, as it can be a woman who is in love with a man who doesn't love her back. So I think that this was also a very useful model for discussion. All right, where was I? Okay, so this is my final slide, and it is about what I think it could be good to have in mind when you work with SEN students. And what I try to do, I'm not I wouldn't say I'm the best at it, but I really try to keep these things in mind when I work with my students. So the first thing is try thinking from your student's perspective when you choose methods and assignments. And you can always adapt them to your own students. You can find an idea and then you think, okay, how can I use this? I really want to use this. How can I do this with my students? So I seldom think that something is impossible. I rather try to adapt and make some changes for it to fit my students. If I find something interesting. Okay, another thing, difficulties within severe diagnosis are usually not possible to improve or get rid of with extra drill or practice. It happens that my students really improve in certain areas, but many of them it's not really possible for them to improve. So I really try I try to be very careful with my students and give them good exercises and assignments, not too big things, rather small things and many small things than one big assignment, because it's difficult for them to overlook a big assignment. It's better for them with small things to work with, and then you can still get the big picture in the end, and look back. What have we done? What have we worked with? And then you can sum it up, and then they can see that they've actually done lots of work, even though it was it was small bits and pieces. But you usually need to help them to put the pieces together and show them what they've actually achieved and what they've done, and summarize things, because they're not really the best at doing that themselves. All right, and finally, respect that your SEN students might need extra time for all kinds of assignments, and consider which assignments are the most important ones, and let your SEN student focus on those. So what I suggest is that, if you have a SEN student in your class, included in your class, then that student can read the book, do the discussions and whatever, and then you can give your other students a writing assignment, or oh my god, my voice is disappearing. Okay, so you can always give your other students more work than you give to your SEN students. All right, that was just about all I had. I'm very happy that you have all joined and that you have listened to this, and I hope you have gotten something out of it. If it's just a tinsy-wincy detail, then I would be very happy. Okay, thank you. That was all from me, and I don't know if there are any questions from the group. I've seen that something is going on. I see that something is going on in the bottom right corner. I just need some water. Oh my god, I haven't planned my day today. I've had so many lectures with my students, and now this. So my voice is.
You take some water, and I will now take the mic. Thank you so much. It was very interesting for me. It was a bit refreshing to see how I can approach in teaching literature through many different activities, using models such as Venn diagram, or the new one for me, so your Harry window. But before I ask some questions, I would like to ask the questions that were made by the attendees, participants. So I hope I have taken down all of them. First of all, I think Taliha, I don't know if I'm pronouncing correctly, but one of the things that she asked was, what kind of topics do you usually choose to take their attention? That was in the beginning of your presentation. Do you use, is there a specific probably literature that you should, because you have been talking about bullying, do you choose on your own? Is it maybe written by the, is it mandatory from your agency?
Ah,
So maybe, I think Talika meant that question. You choose yourself. You are free, you can choose
yeah.
whatever you want.
No. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, I choose
Okay, very
myself.
good.
I don't.
How many hours
No, I
or
don't
lessons
choose.
per week do you have Swedish
Mm,
in with your SEN students?
yes,
This is my
but I
question.
try to think. I try to choose things that
Okay.
I
3 hours
I
per
can
week.
sort of guess might
Okay, very good.
catch their interest.
Another question from
Yes.
Ramila. She asked if you are working in a private or a state school.
Uh, okay. 3 hours per week, and 1 hour at a time.
Mhm.
Hmm. It's a, well, it's run by the
Okay.
municipality of Stockholm,
Okay.
but
Then
it
when you
is
have
sort
been
of
explaining the chart with
linked
the
to the
marks
state
E,
in a
C,
way
A,
because
Talita,
the
also
students
very
are
good.
choose
I think
chosen
Demet
by an
asked directly in the
an
chat, and you answered
agency
him, which was very good for us
uh,
also to
run
know.
by the
In Croatia,
state.
we have numbers for
Hmm.
marks, not letters like in America. I didn't know that that's the same in Swedish, in
Yes.
Sweden, sorry. But Talita asked a question: what if the student or a student are not successful, is there
Yeah.
any extra thing for them to make them pass, or they
Ah.
study the same grade twice
Yeah.
if they don't pass? How do you?
Uh, Well, it happens that they do the same course twice, but I usually try to give them
Okay.
something, or I mean, I can
So only these
maybe take an
three,
hour with the student
yeah,
and we
only
can
these
try to
three
work
marks,
things out.
E, C, and A, and
So I
that's it.
really
There's
try to
nothing in
make them
between.
pass if possible. But it
Okay.
happens that they have to, well, attend the same course more than one
Okay.
year. Usually not
Then
in
there is.
Swedish, though.
Yeah. Well, it's good. Well, what we actually all wanted here, because I see
Yes,
what
there is
people have been
something in
posting in the
between,
chat, is
but they
it's
don't have
quite
their own
nice to
criteria or
see what
knowledge
kind of
requirements.
possibilities of teaching and
So
schools do you
there,
have in
it's a
Sweden.
complicated
We would all like to have.
system.
Well, of course,
Yes.
in Croatia there are also some schools specialized. But maybe it might differ definitely. There is also another question when you have been talking about literature and how you do. And then Lorena, I can't remember the surname. Lorena asked if you have been using films in your classroom, like for instance Hamlet by Kenneth Brannigan or Romeo and Juliet by Zeffirelli. Have you been showing films in your classroom in general, in your literature class? Yeah, good, Lorena.
Hmm. Yes, I do that sometimes. I
Uh-huh.
do show films sometimes, but not that much because, again, we come back to
Yeah,
this
it could be a
time
clip.
dilemma,
It could be a clip from a movie,
where
like you have just mentioned. Yeah, and
well, a film
yeah,
is taking up a lot of time.
yeah. That's because
So
I'm sure
well,
that you
maybe
have been using. Like for instance, you
once
said
a
that you
year
don't
or
need to read the
something, I do
whole
that.
book with your students. Or there was also a question. You
Yeah,
said
it
that you
can
have been
definitely
reading
be.
out
Yes, I
loud
use.
to your
Yes, that I
students one or
use.
two
I
chapters.
use
And somebody
video
said,
clips and
how did
things
they
like that.
flow? How do they
Absolutely.
fall? Somebody
Yes.
asked also. How long does it take you to finish the analysis of a certain literature? Do you take like 3 hours, 6 hours in a row? Does it take like a whole month to just
Yeah.
analyze one literature? How long did it take you to finish the text that you suggested the book? Yeah.
Uh, this. yeah, this took a long time because the problem with my students is that when they come home, they cannot take out a book or start listening to the story themselves always, because they're in need of someone helping them and things like that. And they also they don't always remember that they're supposed to read at home.
I think that's very
So
important.
this took some time.
Yeah, it's very important, even
It's
to the high school level.
so
Like I was
this
reading the other
year
day in my
I have
classroom.
chosen
I
not
took a
to.
very short story, it's more
This
like
year
a
I
horror or
chose
something
to
like that. And I told them just relax, sit back. If they're very good, they're upper intermediate
With
students
another
in
group.
English. While I was reading, I tried to show them what I want them, as you have just mentioned, to guess the continuation of the story. And some of them said, "Oh, I got goosebumps, teacher," something like. And it's very important to just go into the mood of the story to get them start talking about the book or the text, or to get the critical thinking, analysis, and so on. So it's we can use various motivational skills, right? Either show a movie, or just read aloud, or discuss, post a question on the board, use maybe music. So it's quite nice. And I think it was Sussane who asked the question about reading out loud in chapter, and he just said thank you for answering the question. Okay, I don't know if I have answer. I don't know. These are the questions that I have taken. Thank you so much. It was very long for you to talk so much. I apologize, but during your presentation, several of the colleagues in the chat posted that they are very pleased that you are speaking very slowly and that they could understand you, because I speak very fast, and my members know that. But when I do have a presentation, I try to speak slow, and it's very important that we could compare whether we are doing some stuff very similar or different.
Okay,
and
thank
I
you.
think some of the models I will use in my classroom as well. Thank you all so much for coming, and thank you one more time, Sussane. I'm not going to pronounce the surname. And you, as Asti mentioned, all of you will get the certificates of attendance. If there are any problems, please contact me on my in the group, eTwinning group.
Thank you, everybody.
Inclusive Education. You can send me an email. This is the email. Oh, just a moment. This is my private email, but you can find me on eTwinning, gmail.com. If by any chance there are any missing certificates and you have been attending. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording now. Thank you so much one more time, Sussane, and thank you everybody for coming. Hope to see you soon in another webinar. We will have definitely one in June. And but before that, there will be some other activities as well.